Hey everybody, welcome to one of the first master classes that we're going to be having in this group, where I just want to impart to you some of the tips and tricks and successes and unsuccessful things that I've seen people doing and sometimes not doing in their business, and a lot of the stuff can also be applied into your personal life. I was going to do them on Zoom and then like upload them to YouTube, and that just, I'm like, we have a small community here of all, pretty much everyone here is an entrepreneur, so I'm going to do it within our BizBuds community, and it'll be me talking for the most part. I thought I'd get away from the formalities of a PowerPoint presentation and all that. I might still record some of this and put it online as part of my courses and offerings, but for this group, it's going to be me kind of just talking to you. And if you happen to catch it live, feel free to ask a question and we'll have like a Q&A session, and there's a bee following me. And if you catch the replay, comment #replay and still post your questions, and I will make sure to come back and reply to all of your questions to the best of my ability given the forum. So hope you guys had a great summer. My kids are back in school. Yay! I did choose to do in person, leave them out of the house. That's the only way that I can function. I can't work with a 4-year-old home kind of asking me for a snack every 10 seconds. And I just think that they thrive and really do better in person school. So it's quiet in my house today, which is great. The grandparents have been great all summer, taking turns helping me out by taking them. But really and truly, I had to put the business on the back burner. It was like survival mode. What can I do in 2 dedicated days to get everything, just keep the momentum going? Luckily, my staff was still there. They were working their regular work week, but for me, it was mostly just trying to stay on top of things. And so now I'm coming into September. It's like my new year. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but September ends up being like a business or an entrepreneur's new year. Even in my personal life, I feel like it's a new year because all the fun of summer kind of stops when school starts. The weather gets cooler, not necessarily as many activities. Luckily, we don't get snow as early as we used to. I remember when I was younger, we'd get snow in like November. So it feels like you can see the shifts happening, and I wanted to impart some of these shifts into our business too, because let's face it, for the past year and a half, since March of 2020, everyone's business has been just up and down, twisted inside out. We need to get back on track. And there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with planning for that right now, just because, are they going to lock us down again? Are they going to put more restrictions? We don't know. And so everything that I'm going to talk about today, I say it with a little bit of a grain of salt, that if things go sideways for reasons beyond your control, you're forced to shut down, you're forced to close, stop doing business, kids come back home and you can't focus on your business again, it's not your fault. That has nothing to do with your ability to succeed in business. That is completely out of your control. But what you can do is try your best to manage the fallout from the decisions that are put upon you. So when it comes to being successful the last quarter of 2021, there's 4 months left of 2021. Remember when we thought we'd be all dying in 2020 with COVID? Like, we've survived so much already. The things I'm going to talk about, you can do it for any period in your business. But the first step number 1, is to get your books up to date. We don't want to wait until tax season next year for you to be doing your bookkeeping. You really and truly need to be doing your bookkeeping on a consistent basis, because the questions that I'm going to talk about going forward, you're not going to be able to answer them if you don't have the data to review. And if your data is not being presented to you in a way that allows you to have these conversations with yourself. So having your books set up and having your books be organized in a way that allows you to really and truly make these inferences is really important. And so if you're thinking as I kind of go over some of these questions, if you're thinking, I don't know, or I don't have the ability to find that information from the books the way that I'm keeping it, then we really need to revisit your foundation and your accounting and tax systems to see what can we do to get these questions. So the first report that I think is so important, in fact, to me, this is the most important report that you should be reviewing, is called your expenses by vendors. So vendors are people that we do business with. We are paying them for their services. And so one of the reports that you should be running is called an expenses by vendor. So you want to know what the grand total that you spent on a specific person is, a specific company is. Most people, when they think of bookkeeping, they're like, oh, I just got to put it in the right category. Yeah, for taxes, we file it by category. But when we're looking at our numbers, the categories by vendor, to me, is the most important report. Why? Because this is now when you're going to ask yourself, did I actually need to spend money on that person? So you want to look at the recurring expenses, things like your subscriptions, your memberships. How much money are you spending every single month on a particular service? And are you using that service to the fullest extent possible? A lot of us get really crazy when it comes to subscriptions or even memberships, and we pay for memberships because we think we're going to use the benefits. I personally had been part of a group. It was the very first group that I had ever joined in my networking career, the very first group. I loved their lunch and learns, and so I was a paying member of them. And then things kind of shifted, and they went a little bit more online, less lunch and learns, and I was still a paying member. And at this point, their membership was like $600 for the year. But I told myself, well, they have a lot of online stuff. I'm going to do those online things. I never did the online things, ever. And so eventually, as much as I loved this organization, as much as I had learned so much from this organization in my earlier entrepreneur years, the way they had shifted, the way they had changed things no longer aligned with what I was looking for out of any group. Sorry, it's really windy outside. Any group that I was a part of. So I actually stopped being a member of this group. And so by looking at, I'm gonna have to hold it. By looking at my expenses by vendor and identifying that, hey, I'm still spending X hundreds of dollars on XYZ, I was able to have that internal conversation and say, do I want to renew this membership? Or, for example, sometimes we pay the monthly recurring fee because we think, you know what, we're going to save money, because sometimes they'll give you a discount of, you know, pay monthly and you'll get a free month, or pay all up front and you'll get a free month instead of a pay as you go situation. And this is especially true for a lot of memberships and networking groups, where they say if you become a member, you get a discount per event as opposed to paying a higher amount for a specific event. So then you got to ask yourself, am I going to every single event? Am I utilizing this so-called discount? Or would it perhaps have been cheaper for me to just pay as I go and not be then committed to a monthly expense or a big lump sum payment? So these are the questions that you really want to ask. You really want to look and identify the recurring expenses. Can we get rid of them? Can we streamline our operations or do something a little bit differently so that we don't need to have so many different software subscriptions, for example? You know, I have met people who are literally doing, well, I need this software for this particular function, I need this software for that particular function. Is there something better out there that combines different functionalities? Do we need to have the different functionalities? Is there an alternative? So the only way you're going to be able to answer any of these questions is if you look at each vendor one by one and ask yourself, was this a one-off expense? If it was a one-off expense, what did you learn from it? Why did you need that as a one-off expense? What did you learn from it? Would you do it again? If it's a recurring expenses, like memberships and subscriptions, do you need to be part of that organization? Do you need that recurring expense? Because if you are not really, truly utilizing it, stop paying for it. It's just a waste of money then. And then for any other vendors that you do find that you are buying from, especially if your business is like a product-based business, you want to then ask if there's any payment plans available, right? We're kind of used to now saying, we get an invoice, we pay it right away. Sometimes we don't even get our product or services until we pay for it. But it doesn't hurt to pick up the phone and talk to the vendor and say, you know what? I have been a long-standing customer for so many years now. I would like some sort of a payment plan or a discount or something. The worst case is that person's going to say no. But if they say, you know what, you have been a long-standing, okay, we can do a payment plan. Maybe we'll charge your card on the 1st and the 15th or every other month or whatever it ends up being. Sometimes people are able to give you payment plans, and that way they know that they're still going to get paid for services that they've given you, and you now don't have to stress about a large bulk cash outflow. You can spread it out throughout the course of however many periods they give you. So these are some really critical questions that you can ask yourself of, so far, what have you been doing? Especially with, if you've got any, if you had a lot of outstanding balances, for example, because of COVID, and you haven't been able to pay them off, it's worth talking to the people that are still outstanding. What are my payment options? They might charge you interest for not paying them, and that's just, it is what it is. The second report, that is the exact opposite of the vendor expenses by vendor, is the income by customer. You want to understand where your money was coming from as well. Was it a one-off? Did you just happen to have one amazing project that gave you a lot of source of income, but you don't expect that project to happen again? Or, more importantly, is a lot of your income and your revenue coming from one source? Is that one customer really driving your business? And this is actually a risky area for you, because heaven forbid something happened to that customer and they go out of business or they take their business elsewhere. Now so much of your business that has been relied upon them is going to suffer. So you almost need to analyze what's going to happen if that customer is not going to do business with you, and try to fill in, make sure your funnel is always full with other prospects, because like I said, heaven forbid that one driving force of your business doesn't want to do business with you again, then what, right? You're kind of up the creek without a paddle. As you're analyzing the customers, as well, figure out, are they paying you on time, right? So talk to the people who owe you money and say, hey, this balance has been outstanding for quite some time. I know it's COVID. Everybody's kind of hurting in different ways. When am I going to get paid? What is your plan? And then make sure that you both mutually agree to this payment plan. We don't like to talk about taking customers to collections, but if you've done work and a customer is not paying you and hasn't paid you and hasn't communicated with you either about their payment intentions, collection agency may be, unfortunately, the way to go. While you're analyzing your expenses and your income sources, take a look and see how any COVID funding has impacted your numbers. If you've been relying on rent subsidy or wage subsidy or even CERB to get by, CRB to get by, a lot of these programs are scheduled to end at the end of October. So part of what you need to plan for right now is what happens in your business when those stop. Has business picked up enough without those sources of funding or those sources of financial support to keep you going? And if not, what are you going to do about it? And that is a really hard question. You may not have an answer to that, but you kind of need to start figuring out what your options are, whether it's going to a bank, BDC, getting a loan, cutting other expenses that you just cannot afford until your business picks up. What are those hard decisions that you need to make right now? Because like I said, so many businesses have been only surviving because of wage subsidy or rent subsidy, and that all is going away. So you really need to understand, what are your numbers like? So maybe you want to take a look at even compare your COVID numbers with your pre-COVID numbers and identify, well, what changed between COVID and pre-COVID, right? Like maybe your customer base changed. Maybe you lost some customers that were big sources of income pre-COVID. And if you lost them because they went, they closed business, not much you can do. If they're maybe potentially reopening, it might be time to reach out to them and just say, hey, we get you're open again. We had a great relationship pre-COVID. Do you want to work together again? If it's expenses that you just can't afford, how are you going to work without those expenses, right? Like, so if you're closing a subscription, for example, well, what were you using that subscription for? What is your alternative going to be? So what is your business process? And whatever you're eliminating, be it a customer or a expense, what is your process going to look like without that? So that's really important. The next part is looking at your cash flow. So we know when we talk about bookkeeping, we use the accrual basis of accounting. So we look at the value of the work done, not necessarily the cash payments that followed. So one of the other exercises that you really need to do as you plan for Q4 is actually look at your cash flow. So when are payments scheduled to go out? So one of the great things that I love to do is put everything on my credit card. Then I know that there's going to be a huge exodus on like one day of the month where all my credit card payment goes out, but all my little recurring expenses go on the credit card. Well, that's great, but what's your credit card balance? When is that going to actually get paid? And do you have enough money coming in? So what are your customer payment plans like? Some people like to always invoice on the same day of the month and give people like a 15-day payment term so they can expect to receive payment between the 1st and like the 15th. If you happen to be somebody that only gets paid before you render services, that's great too. But how many customers do you have coming in the pipeline to cover your expenses? So if you don't have any prospects in the pipeline right now, your expenses don't go away just because you don't have any prospects, right? So understanding your cash in and cash out. This is actual dollar value in and dollar value out. Use a calendar, right? Actually put it in a calendar that I expect to get a payment on this date, this date, this date, or I've invoiced these 3 clients. So by the end of the month, I should have this much in my bank and this is my outflow. And if there's any shortfalls, you need to then identify those shortfalls and how are you going to handle it, whether it's borrowing from your line of credit, making a minimum credit card payment instead of the full credit card payment. What does that look like? So those are the 5 tips that I have for you guys in terms of how to make Q4 amazing. So one is to get your books up to date so that you can answer the questions that I asked you guys. 2, you're going to review the expenses by vendor report. You're going to review your customer income by customer report. And actually just talk about the income by customer. Also break out the customers by the services that they actually purchased from you. So if you find that a lot of people are doing bundle A versus bundle B, C, D, or whatever, and you've got a big demand for bundle A, maybe you can up your prices in bundle A so that the next people coming in, even if they're paying just $20 more, that's $20 more. Figure out what that margin is and the differences between your bundles to see why one bundle is doing better. So you're going to look at update your books, expenses by vendor, income by customer, broken down into what's working, what's not. We're going to look at our pre and post COVID numbers so that we can really understand how COVID impacted our business and what we can maybe do to get back to where we were pre-COVID if we need to. And then you're going to track your cash flow and really see where the shortfalls are so that you can plan for Q4 successfully. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for watching. Like I said, if you're watching this live, feel free to post your questions in the box. If you're watching the replay, definitely comment #replay and feel free to ask your questions. If you feel that you need a little bit more help answering these questions, that's where the CFO packages come in, where we will do your books, make sure we're doing the books in a way that allows us to answer these questions, and then I will guide you. I obviously don't know your business as well as you know your business, but together we can help figure out these questions, and that's part of what the CFO packages look like. So again, thank you all for joining. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. It's really nice outside. If you can sit outside, and we'll talk soon.